What makes a good solo mode? Let's find out. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to the Board Initiative. Today I'm going to be ranking solo mechanics, ranking them from worst to best. Of course, this is all in my opinion, but I love solo games. I'm a big solo gamer, and I love when games that you wouldn't normally think would incorporate a solo mode do it, and they do it well. So I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of discuss my thoughts on what mechanisms are the best suited towards solo modes. So the first mechanism that I want to talk about is flowcharts. This is not a good solo board game mechanism, and I have a board game to demonstrate what I'm talking about here, and that's Bitoku. Bitoku, what a beautiful game, but unfortunately the solo mode is just tedious. If you like, reading flowcharts and spending more time controlling the AI opponent than what you're doing on your turn, then maybe this game won't work for you. But from my experience, half of the time I was playing, I was just referencing the rules in this flowchart, which consists of about 15 steps, each with their own little sub steps in there, and I was just referencing the rule book more than I was actually playing the game, which is never a good sign. Of course, the more you play, the more familiar you'll get with the rules and the less referencing. But still, there's just too much. There's too many little sub rules that you have to keep track of. There also is an action deck which determines which action the opponent AI is going to take. But once you calculate that, then you have to reference the rule book with this flow chart and go step by step and figure out what exactly is going to happen. And I could see why the designer did it this way, to kind of provide a tough kind of opponent experience, which I did lose. I lost my game of solo, which is great. I don't like when I win first on the first try, but the amount of work, that's what I'm calling it, it's work, to get through this solo mode was a little bit too much for me. That being said, though, it was still enjoyable to a point, because just the mechanisms of the game, and if you like dice placement, but I really think this would probably shine with at least 3 or 4 people. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that. So flowcharts, that's my worst solo board game mechanism. The next one I want to talk about is Beat Your Own Score. And the game I want to talk about with that is this game, Magnificent. The Beat Your Own Score solo mode, I'm sorry, but they're boring. They're just boring. You're just doing the same thing every time. Yeah, you could explore different strategies, but the setup is the same. There's nothing new happening. So after 2 or 3 plays, you're most likely just going to get bored of it. And even worse, there's a recommended score that you can beat usually, and that's great, but once you beat that score, I myself have trouble going back to a game to try and beat that score. But I know some people love it, some people like that kind of solo mode, but for me it's just not my cup of tea. And that's what I wanted to bring up with the Magnificent. Even though the mechanisms are really cool, the other mechanisms, there's polyomino tile placement, you're setting up your camp, there's these posters you have to determine which kind of magic show you're going to put on, and the rondelle mechanic where you're going around this circle and determining how many gems and other things you pick up. So it was cool, but again, I played it maybe 2 times, and I don't know if I want to. I just realized the board is upside down. Okay. Well, now that that's fixed, too late. But yeah, I don't know. It's just not my cup of tea. So that is the Magnificent and Beat Your Own Score solo modes. All right, the next mechanism I want to talk about is a simple AI opponent, or an automata deck, and the games I have for that are Fantastic Factories and Red Rising. So these are really cool games. And I had a lot of fun playing the solo mode, and I want to come back to it, which is always a good sign. But Stonemaier Games, they are known for making these awesome like little automata decks, very simple card decks where you flip a card and basically within like 1 or 2 minutes you're doing your opponent's turn, and which is awesome. I really think that you need a simple system if you're going to be playing this type of these types of like competitive games, because otherwise it just feels like a slog. So that's really great, and it leads to some great moments, like for instance Red Rising, like the automata will place a card in one of the different draw piles essentially, and like you have to pick one up as well, and like if the automata deck places one where you are going to pick up from that pile, that's you're like, oh no, like why did it do that? So it leads to some interesting decisions, and it's always like the randomness of it. I like you don't really know what's going to happen, which is awesome. And that's one of the main downfalls with the flowchart system, is that there's some randomness if you have like the action deck, but if you memorize the steps, you can kind of determine where your opponent's going to play, which kind of brings down the difficulty in my opinion. But the solo decks are really fantastic. I really like the one that Red Rising incorporated into its game. And the other type of AI where there's no deck at all, it's just a very simple like rule that kind of gets the opponent going and you're trying to beat it. For instance, Fantastic Factories, you're basically just rolling dice, and depending on the order of the dice, that's going to be what the opponent is going to pick up, like which card he's going to buy from the marketplace, and then based on the numbers of those dice, that's going to be determined if the opponent is going to produce goods, which is basically equivalent to like victory points. So it was really simple, really fast, and I really I appreciated what they did here. And the game is beautiful. I really like this game, by the way. You guys should pick it up if you haven't. So yeah, simple AI / automata decks are awesome, but I think there's one other mechanism that beats that, and that is campaign / scenario driven solo modes. And the games I have on that are Monster Expedition and Hadrian's Wall. And these aren't really normally what people would consider campaign or scenario driven, which is what I like. I could have picked something like Gloomhaven or Spirit Island. Basically anything cooperative in nature is probably going to make a great solo mode, a solo game. But for instance, these games are not inherently, these are competitive type games. Monster Expedition being set collection, and Hadrian Wall being like a Euro. And I wanted to bring these up because I just want to showcase that even if a game is not inherently, cooperative or like a dungeon crawl or something like that, you can still have a campaign / scenario driven solo mechanism that turns out to make an awesome game. For instance, like Hadrian's Wall, I know the designer originally there was no campaign mode, and there was like a beat your own score mode. So, but I guess the designer was like, no, that's not good enough. And he released this campaign that really bringed up the experience. Like, it's really cool. Like, there's little rewards that you get if you beat the campaign. There's different setup instructions, and I love that. I love that you can. There's things that mix up the experience, from game to game. I don't like when it's kind of stagnant and the same all the time. So this was really nice to see, and I had a blast playing this. Highly recommend if you guys haven't heard of that, if you like Euro games. And this is like a roll and write too, but it's like a heavy roll and write, but very cool game. And then the other game is a light game. I don't think a lot of people have heard of this game, Monster Expedition. But it's a set collection game, and you're kind of rolling dice and getting monsters from this like main marketplace up top. But the solo mode in particular is super cool because there's a couple like scenarios, and there's like a very simple AI mechanism where you're just like discarding You're just adding a card essentially to the main marketplace. And the cool thing is that there's like 8 or 9 or 10 different scenarios, and each one does something a little differently. For instance, like you can only use one color die to catch monsters in this scenario, or you need to roll like two sets of the same number to increase your camp value, which is basically how you're going to be rolling more dice. So it was really cool. And it's a cheap game, very small game, and I love playing this just as like a little filler. Like if I have 20 minutes and there's nothing to do, this is an awesome pick. And I love that they made a solo mode that is unique and has that kind of like little scenario driven, different setups, and it's always fun. And I love seeing what like the next scenario is going to do different. So super cool. And yeah, that's really it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on like what are your favorite kind of solo modes and mechanisms, and if there's any that I missed. I know there's some like app-driven ones that I think Clank in Space has like an app-driven solo mode. I want to check that out. But yeah, let me know, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Until next time, have an awesome day. Bye.